Some of you just come for the bumper video. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If you have a Bible, you can turn there to Psalm 23. If you're watching on live stream, I want to say hello to you as well. We're glad you're with us. This is one of those rare passages of Scripture that needs no introduction. Everyone has heard it. It's not only one of the most famous, or actually the most famous psalm in all of the Psalms, the book of Psalms, but perhaps in all of Scripture, and it's one of the most well-known pieces of literature in all the world. But sometimes things can be so familiar that they lose their power, their impact. They're just words. You hear it and you're like, yeah, I know that. It's so easy to let it fly by. And while undoubtedly, if you've ever been to a funeral, you've most likely heard this read. It's read at pretty much every funeral. It's really not so much about death as it is about life. It's not for the person who has departed. It's for those who are still here. It's not about the end. It's actually about the middle. When you're surrounded on all sides, when the waters are up to your neck, when you feel like you're out of options, paralyzed by fear, that's when you want to read this psalm. This is a psalm you read when you're 15 years old and the comments on social media are just brutal and you don't even know how you're going to face anyone at school the next day. Or when you're 34 and your spouse walks out and you've never been lonelier in your life. Or when you're 46 and you're spinning so many plates just to make life work, but there's no end in sight. It's just go, go, go. And the demands pile up and there's no light at the end of the dark tunnel. Or when you're 72 and you realize how fast you were forgotten when you stepped out of your career field and now the kids are grown and they have their own lives and you're wondering what becomes of me. So no, this is not a psalm about necessarily, and while it can be about grieving the end, it's actually a psalm about how to survive in the middle, how to make it even maybe through the moments. But more than anything else, Psalm 23 is about God. In other words, any comfort that this psalm might bring us lies in what it tells us about God and who he is and how he wishes to relate to us. The point of this psalm is to shake us out of despair and move us away from what we might be feeling at the moment by reminding us of what is true, but at times hard to see. So what does this psalm tell us about God anyway? It tells us a couple things. First, that God is a shepherd, which means he leads us in real time, every day, just like a shepherd leads sheep in real time. But the second part that we can easily miss is that he's also described as a host, like the host of a banquet, which means he provides for us as though we're honored guests, giving us everything that we need. And so this image of God as both leader and provider is what the psalm is trying to tell us about him. And it's important that we take this for what it is because it affects how we see God. And a lot of us may be coming in here from various religious backgrounds and traditions, some of which have taught us that God is distant, that God just kind of stands there with his arms crossed, looking down at you going like, okay, see how you figure this one out. And you might have felt all your life like you exist in the periphery of God's favor, but only the holy people, the special people, the spiritual people are the ones that are in the middle, and you'll have to go through someone else to get to God. Sometimes you learn that. Or on the flip side, that God is someone who just kind of wants to be your buddy, your wingman, your co-pilot, just kind of help you get to where you know you want to go, and he's just kind of there to give you the little boost along the way. And this psalm kind of throws that out the window as well. He is our shepherd. He is our guide. He's the one who leads us. And so both of these analogies, the shepherd and the host, remind us that left to ourselves, we really are helpless. We are lost. We are hungry, incapable of rescuing ourselves. And yet we have a God who stands ready to give us all that we need. And so the first part of the verse talks about God as shepherd. What does it teach us? And there's several things it teaches us. First of all, that because the Lord leads me, I am able to rest without any fear. Look at the first verse again. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, want here doesn't speak so much to desire as it does to need. Other translations say, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. There is nothing that I need. That's the idea. Now, for many of us, we could just stop right there and not to really need to read anything else in the psalm because our problem is right here. In other words, let me ask you, how would your life change if you really read that phrase and believed it? The Lord is my shepherd, I don't need anything else. How would your life change if you read that and believed it? Now, obviously, there are things that we need, but if the Lord is our shepherd, he knows, here's the thing, just like a shepherd knows what the sheep need even more than the sheep do, so God knows our needs even more than we do. Do you believe that? Because it's easy to go, God, you don't understand. You're up there, you're in heaven, you're not me, you're not living my life. You don't know what I need. Well, wait a second, the Lord's my shepherd. Because sheep aren't that smart, right? You can learn all these things about sheep. Sheep are really dumb animals. Like sheep will lead themselves all off a cliff together. They'll just follow the sheep in front of them. Sheep will stand out in the sun and not move into the shade to the point where they'll die of heat exhaustion. They're just like, I'm hot, I don't know what to do, so I'll just die. They're dumb animals. Now, I don't think the Bible's trying to say that we are dumb, but we all can see throughout history and throughout almost every part of the world the relationship between sheep and a shepherd. The shepherd knows what the sheep need more than the sheep do. So right out of the gate, God is the one who leads me. He's the one in charge. And so because of that, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. So green pastures are places that sheep could graze. They could eat, they could be refreshed, they could lie down and they could rest. And so he's not saying he makes me lie down like you have to lie down. It's more of he lets me lie down. He allows me to lie down. His provision in my life makes it available for me to do so. It's a place, at least for the moment, I can rest. And then the still waters, as opposed to trying to find water in a rushing river that's going to drown the sheep, it's a quiet place. It's a restful place. And in that, my soul is restored. It's repaired. It's brought back to where it should be. Let me ask you, what's the condition of your soul right now? Are you in need of repair? Are you tired? I can tell you for me, I know when my soul is in need of rest or repair, when things that are not giants start to look like giants. That's how I know I'm tired. It's like the old quote from George Patton, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And it does. You know what I mean? When you look at your life and you're going like, you wake up in the morning, I don't know if I can face this day. I mean, I have a meeting and I got to put gas in the car. And there's no milk in the fridge. And the kids got to go to gymnastics. And it's like, okay. You're probably seeing it a little bit bigger than it actually is. Because you're tired. Because you're worn out. And so what happens is if you don't deal with that, if you don't take care of that, if you don't acknowledge that, you start living in that space and you start making decisions based on fear and weakness and desperation. And so green pastures and still waters aren't just about checking out for a while. It's about intentionally refueling, resetting, refreshing, recalibrating. And that means reminding yourself of what is true. And what is true is that we have a shepherd who leads us in real time on Tuesday, on Wednesday at 3 a.m., on Friday at 6:30, when you feel like there's no one there. The shepherd is always leading us. and which means basically that your worst fears are not going to come true. And even if they do come true, they are not going to be as bad as you think, because we love to catastrophize. And we think, well, if this happens, then this is going to be, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And it's like, wait a second. God's going, I'm going to lead you. And there could be tragedy, there could be difficulty, but even in that difficulty, I'm still leading you. And it's my responsibility to take care of you, and I will give you what you need. And this situation you're dealing with is not going to ultimately be your undoing. And here's the thing, the bigger that God is in your life, the smaller those giants become. You have to know that. And this is why it's so critical. When we sit there and go, yeah, God, he's out there or whatever. And then you wonder why your life is unmanageable. But when God takes center stage and you see God as this shepherd guiding you, all of a sudden you go, yeah, that was scary, but it's not so scary anymore. And so we need to remember this because we so easily drift from it. The Lord leads me and I can rest without fear. Why? Well, because it says he leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Now, by the way, this is one of those verses that's so easy to read past, but it might be hidden in there, the most profound part of the entire psalm. So he leads me in righteousness, so I'm going to make right decisions that are going to keep me from falling off the cliff. But why does he do it? He does it for his name's sake. In other words, it's not only for me, but also for him. Because he can't go back on his promises because he's God. Now, this is really huge, and you need to stick this in the little arsenal of when it comes to your understanding of the God that it is that we believe in and that we serve and that the Bible reveals to us. This is not a God that just does everything for our benefit, but he keeps his promises because of him, because of who he is. He cannot go back on his promises for that reason. Listen to what John Stott says in his book, The Cross of Christ, when he writes about the nature of God. God cannot contradict himself. This is his integrity. As for us, we are constantly aware of our human inconsistencies. They usually arouse a comment. It's so uncharacteristic of him, we say. Or you are not yourself today. Or I've come to expect something better from you. But can you imagine saying such things to or about God? He is always himself and never inconsistent. If he were to ever behave uncharacteristically in a way that is out of character with himself, he would cease to be God and the world would be thrown into moral confusion. No, God is God. He never deviates one iota, even one tiny hair's breadth from being entirely himself. So God's promises are unchangeable. So when we read this, and we know that the Lord is my shepherd back then, he is our shepherd today. He doesn't go back on the things that he promised. So this is why it says in 2 Timothy 2 verse 13, if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. So last week I was out skiing with a guy in our church, and we get on this gondola, and I'm proud that I said the word gondola correctly. I said it wrong a few weeks ago, and my kids eviscerated me when they were here. Huge embarrassment to them. Anyway, we get on this gondola, and they packed us all on there. And this guy sitting across from me, he was like, he could tell, he's like one of those, because we're still relatively new here, so we're kind of newbies still, and this guy, he was like a veteran skier. He's an older guy, and you could just tell, like, he's been around, he knows all the mountains, and he starts talking, I was over here, and I was over here. And then he's talking to the guy next to him, and they were with a little group, and he's saying, like, talking about how in other parts of the country, some of the lifts had gotten stuck for hours and they had to rescue people. And I'm like, it's kind of funny timing to talk about that while we're on the, it's like showing a movie about a plane crash while you're on a flight. And it's just not the best time to do that. But anyway, so we're on the gondola, and he says, the thing with these gondolas is that they are built so well, they're actually over-engineered. Like and this is what he's saying. He's like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but he's telling me, he's like, no, the tolerances, the weight, because they got to account for all the potential rescues and all these other things that are not accounted for. They had to build that in to make sure that it could handle it. So there's these things really are built they're way over-engineered for what their use is. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I was sitting there going, I guess that makes sense. Because I've gone onto the gondola, And you get a bunch of people on there. Some 17-year-old guy is working there, throws everybody in there. And you look at the little sticker that says don't lean out, don't shake the thing, don't throw thing. And there's the weight limit, right? You're looking at that, and then you kind of do a little ad hoc calculations, right? You're thinking, all right, well, okay, but what if a big gust of wind comes? You know what I mean? And how well are these things built? But the reality is, the point what this guy is making is that these gondolas are made to withstand way more. Oh my gosh. This reminds me of the bird thing. Remember the bird thing that happened a few weeks ago? Dang. Gondola, I'm getting there. I'm sorry. I was raised in the desert, or LA and Arizona. We didn't have those things. Okay, gondola. The thing about the gondola is that it's over-engineered, just like God's promises are over-engineered. There you go. See, that was the point of the analogy. In other words, you can't break them. So no matter, in other words, there's nothing in your life that you're going to do. Oh no, you've overloaded the gondola of God's promise. It's going to snap. You can't do that because God's promises are over-engineered because they're dependent upon Him, not on you. And that should bring great comfort to you. When you feel like you're the one that's gonna, blow the whole thing up because, well, God's never had to deal with this, and I'm just, I've never been in this situation before. God's like, well, that doesn't matter. My promises withstand how you are feeling in a given moment. So when I'm on the gondola, no matter how I feel about the weight capacity of that thing, it doesn't matter. The reality of it is outside any given feeling I have at the moment. Does that make sense? That's what I'm trying to say. It took me a while, but I did it. You can't overload the gondola of God's promises. Even, as it says in verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. So in the Middle East, I haven't seen them, but they're there. I would see them in Arizona once in a while when we lived there, and they're probably the case here, but there are ravines, deep, deep ravines, where the sun shines in, and it's so deep, and it can be so dark that you don't know if your next step is in a shadow or off a cliff. Because it's bright, 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 and then just black. And I've done, trail running and stuff, and there's been times where I'm like, I can't see in front of me right now, because the shadow is a shadow of death. If you just think there's a trail that's going to keep on going, it could be a cliff and you can't see because of the shadow. And so there's times in life when you think the next step could be my last, even when I'm in that place. So what I love about it is he just doesn't say, well, when life gets difficult, even when I'm in a place where the next step could be my last, I will fear no evil. In other words, no injury, no danger, or no harm, because you are there with me. Your rod and your staff. So the rod would be used to fight off attacking animals, and the staff is kind of like helping you guide on your way. Now, come on this way, come on this way. I don't want you to go off the path. But in those moments, I'm not going to fear. So our leadership team, along with some of our staff, has been talking about where do we see God taking us as a church? In other words, what kind of people do we want to become over time as we continue in this journey together? And it's all part of our mission. Why are we here, right? What are we hoping God to do with us over time? And one of the words that we keep coming back to over and over is this word fearless. Not in a reckless way, but in a way that it reflects exactly what this verse is saying. So we have a church full of people that go, yeah, you know what? We may be walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And you know what? No one lives forever. We may meet tragedy of some kind. There may be difficult days ahead. We don't know. But here's the thing. We're just not going to be afraid about it. We're just not going to walk around living in fear and go, well, and when you hear yourself start to say things like, well, I just really worry about this. Well, I'm just really afraid that if this happens, when you start hearing that come out of your mouth, time out. Well, what's that coming from? See, It doesn't mean that we just run headlong into things without being, careful at times. Trust me, that's not the point. But the point is, I'm not going to live my life based on fear. I'm going to live my life based on the courage that God gives me, that he is my shepherd, that I'm walking forward, and that enlarges my heart. And now I can live and make decisions and go after things from a place of strength and confidence, and not like cowering, like, well, I don't know, then this can happen, and this can happen. And it's just like this downward spiral. And so he's saying, he's like, God, you are my shepherd, and because of that, I can walk confidently into all of this. And that leads us to the next point. Not only does God lead us as a shepherd, he provides for us as a host. So look at verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so what we see here is because the Lord provides for me, I can be confident that my future is secure. I can be confident. So the imagery shifts from the shepherd to a host, and David now sees God's welcoming him into his home as though he was his honored guest. But it's all under duress. It's like with the understanding that there are enemies around. So it's not after the battle, it's in the middle of the battle. It's in the presence of danger. It's in the presence of resistance. And so he's saying, God welcomes me in and prepares a table, and then says, not only here, why don't you eat some stuff? But he says, here's oil for your head. So back then, they didn't necessarily have showers everywhere. So if you wanted to refresh yourself, they would have oil. You get done with a long journey and you're like, I just feel tired. I just want to clean up. And the oil would kind of bring refreshment to your face and make you look better, make you feel better. And that was the idea, that there's a refreshing that's going on, and then my cup overflows. It's a picture of abundance. Sometimes when you're out, out on the wherever you are, and you're like, I only have so much water left. But in God's house, the resources never end. So if you spill a little, that's okay. God's got more. Come on, my cup's overflowing, because it's the abundance of God's grace in that moment. But it's not just material provision, it's strength and refreshment in the middle of resistance. When you're surrounded by enemies, it assumes conflict. This is the weekend that we commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King. I was about last March, I was out in Montgomery, Alabama, and I went to the Rosa Parks Museum. Montgomery is an interesting place if you haven't had a chance to go there. It's very kind of haunting because we don't realize this if you're not from there, but you can stand in the downtown area of Montgomery, and you can stand in buildings where human beings were bought and sold on American soil. It's a very ominous kind of experience when you're there. You get this feeling that something really bad happened here. It's like the aftermath of a bomb. You just walk the streets. But in any case, at the Rosa Parks Museum, they have a tribute to Martin Luther King. And it's on a plaque, and it captured me because it's kind of like this wax kind of representation of him sitting at a table with a cup of coffee. And it commemorates this evening that he writes about where he had received another death threat on his telephone at around midnight, because didn't have unlisted numbers back then, so you could just call him. And this guy's called and said, if you're not out of here, we're going to blow your brains out and blow up your house and kill your family and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of grabbed him a little bit. And he's sitting there, and he's kind of wrestling with God, and he's talking about how he's like, God, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I think what I'm doing is right. I think these things that we're trying to do are the correct things. And he gets to this place where he says, but Lord, I must confess that I'm awake now. I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage. And I can't let the people see me like this, because if they see me weak and losing my courage, they will begin to get weak. And then it happened, and it seemed that at that moment I could hear an inner voice saying to me, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, stand up for justice, stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you, even until the end of the world. I heard the voice of Jesus saying to still fight on. He promised never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me alone. It strikes me that the most prominent figure in the civil rights movement of the 20th century was able to do what he did in the midst of incredible resistance that, of course, eventually cost him his life, because he recognized that God was with him over and over and over. He believed that Jesus was with him. And there's something about that. There's something powerful about that. The presence of God right there with me, giving me the strength to do what I've been called to do. The great thing about this part of the psalm, preparing a table in the presence of my enemies, is you don't have to wait until it's over. You know, some of us we're running so hard right now that we say, well, at some point, when things get easier, then I'll stop, and then I'll eat at God's table, and then I'll rest. And we say these things to ourselves. And the problem is, I'm sitting here talking to a bunch of you type A, high-achieving people. You know who you are. You're a bunch of goal setters and all this kind of stuff. And here's the thing you tell yourself. You say, I'm just in a busy season. You ever said that? I'm in a busy season. But here's the thing about seasons. I heard this from another pastor. If there's no end date, it's not a season. It's your life. So stop fooling yourself and telling yourself that this is only temporary. If you don't have an end date to the manic way in which you're living your life, it's not a season. We talk about this amongst our staff because our staff is running really hard right now because a lot of good things are happening in Mountain Life Church, and we're like, oh, God, and we hear ourselves saying, well, when we get to this point, it'll be easier. And we're like, no, it won't. Because when we get there, there's only going to be something else. So the bad news is I just shot out any idea that any false hope you would have that your busy season is going to come to an end. The good news is you don't have to wait for the busy season. You stop now and you walk into the house of God, and God prepares a table for you and says, here, you need to sit down. Here, why don't you eat? Here, have some more. Have some more. Let's get that dirt off your face. Oh, those guys out there, those guys that want to take your life, your enemies, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. They can't touch you. They can't touch you. You're in my house. You are my child. So now let's talk. How's the battle going? What do you need? You know you're going to prevail, right? You're going to prevail. You're going to be okay. And those voices, the presence of the enemies, get quieter and quieter because God's voice gets louder and louder. Jesus says in John chapter 10, so here's the thing. Jesus is going to talk, he's talking to his disciples. And so we have this beautiful Psalm 23, and all of these people would have been raised in the Jewish understanding of the world. So they would have heard Psalm 23 way more than any of us heard it, I'm sure. And all of a sudden, Jesus comes along and says, hey, by the way, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay my life down for the sheep. And so while we have the Lord is my shepherd, and that's wonderful, what we have even more is we have the person of Jesus saying, I'm not just any shepherd, I am the good shepherd. I am the ultimate shepherd. I am the perfect shepherd. And all of a sudden we see in that verse, both of those analogies coming true, the one who leads and the one who provides, the shepherd and the host, because he leads us as we obey him, and he provides for us as he lays down his life for us. And he does for us what we could not have done for ourselves. And so in the Last Supper, when the disciples are there, one of them takes off to go sell him out. The other one's about to deny him 3 times, and everyone's freaked out. And he passes around bread, and he passes around wine. And he says, this is my body, which is broken for you. This is the blood of the new covenant that's shed for you, for the forgiveness of sins, for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And the thing that should blow us away about God is it's not just that God remains true to his promises to take care of us while we're on this planet. God remains true to himself that he be the one to rescue us from our sins. Any act less than Jesus paying fully and completely on the cross would make God a lesser God. That's what's crazy about it. God stays true to his word and himself in the person of Jesus, not just rescuing you from, the IRS or some health problem or whatever the case may be, but rescuing us from literally hell by his own blood. He's the one that stepped in our place. And so he becomes the shepherd, and then he becomes the host, giving and providing in abundance. Your cup overflows with grace because that's who he is. And so because of that, we can say, you can say, not because of you or how great you are, but because of what's been done for you and me. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's a hard thing what I'm about to say, but I love you, and so I don't care because you need to hear it. For the believer, this earth is the closest to hell you'll ever get. You know that. It's the closest to hell you ever get. For the unbeliever, this is the closest to heaven you'll ever get. And it's not a bad place. It's fun. It's pretty good. But it's over like that. So we must be aware. God is here, and he wants us to surrender ourselves to him and his provision, to trust him in all things, to obey him, because he wants us to live in his house forever. Don't make this place the closest you've ever gotten to heaven. It's good, but it's not that good. It's nice out there, but it's not that nice compared to what you were made for. Let the one who made you be the one who is your shepherd and your provider. Let's pray. With your heads bowed and eyes closed, today maybe is the day that you surrender yourself to the Good Shepherd. If that's you today, just say, you know what? God, I need to turn my life over to you. I need to no longer live for myself. I know that I could never stand before you and list all the wonderful things that I've done. That just wouldn't impress you. Instead, to be honest with you, I know my life is actually full of sin. And I need a provider. I need someone who is going to stand in my place and take my sin. And I believe, Jesus, that that's what you've done. You are the shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. And I believe you laid down your life for me. And so today I give you my life. Some of us need to say that to God right now. This isn't about religion. It's not about checking a box. It's not about being a well-rounded citizen. It is about a gut level, straight up confrontation with a holy God. Say, God, before anything else, I need to be right with you. So tell him that. He is the one who provides our forgiveness. God, for everyone else in here, maybe we've walked with you for a while, but to be honest, we're scared. We're in a place we've never been before. We've forgotten that you're our shepherd. We've been like a sheep wandering around on our own. Maybe we think we know better than you do. God, we confess that. God, would you shepherd us? Would you lead us in real time? Could we hear your voice and see you? Lead those of us beside those green pastures who've been so full of anxiety and fear and doubt and all that kind of active, frenetic energy that just doesn't do anything but bring a cloudiness of spirit and mind and heart, just drives us down. That's not how you want us to live. God, in the presence of our enemies, in the presence of health enemies or work enemies or whatever it might be, the things that we feel that are attacking us, in the presence of all that, God, you lay a table before us. Help us to know how to receive that well. God, we thank you for this psalm. We thank you for what it means. Thank you for how you are our shepherd and our provider. In Jesus' name.